everybody, welcome to the show. My name is Amanda Ostrader. I am a teacher-turned-homeschool mom, and this is Raising A to Z, a place where I talk about all things homeschooling. And today I'm going to answer the question of, are you actually qualified to homeschool your kids? So I know this is a huge fear for a lot of homeschooling families, is that parents don't feel like they're qualified. And I actually sometimes get the opposite response because I was a trained teacher and I have worked in public and private schools, and people, they're like, oh, of course you can homeschool your kids. It's okay for you because like you're qualified. And I highly disagree. I think most parents are qualified. If you have gone to school, if you have been educated, if you can read and write, if you some kind of GED, high school diploma equivalent type thing, you're probably qualified to homeschool your kids. I think it's very sad and scary that we spend 18 years of our lives learning, and then we tell those people that they have not learned enough in order to teach their own kids. Like, what did we do with the first 18 years of our lives if we can't teach our own kids things? So I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to kind of demystify homeschooling and why you are actually qualified. And I can do that really honestly because I am a teacher. I went to teachers college. I know what it's like. Number one, parents are teachers. To say that they're not because they didn't go to university and get a degree in education is wrong. They did not get a degree in mass education, but they are still teachers. Just like we consider coaches teachers and, piano teachers, they may not have a qualification in how to do something. Like, there's no degree that says, oh, you got a degree in how to teach football. But they are still qualified to give those instructions. Parents, same thing. You are qualified to teach just by the fact that you are a parent, and you've already been teaching your kids. You taught your kids how to go potty. You taught your kids how to speak. You help them correct their pronunciation when they say the wrong, I instead of say like caught, I catched it. Oh, you caught it. Like, that's teaching. That is teaching. You are already teaching your kids, and to say that you are not qualified to teach them other things is absurd. Like, anybody can teach kids to sing their ABCs. It doesn't have to be a preschool teacher. Anyone can teach kids to count to 10. It doesn't have to be a kindergarten teacher. And if you extrapolate from that, as long as you feel comfortable teaching subjects above that, you are definitely qualified. So you're qualified. You're already a parent. You're a teacher. Great job. And then just to add to that, if your kids are in public school, you're probably helping with homework, which is not that far off from homeschooling anyway. Number two, there is no right way to teach. I think this is like a strange misconception that people have, is that teachers have been taught the right way to teach. There is no right way to teach. There is no singular way to give instruction to teach any subject. There might be some best practices. So for example, we know that teaching phonics is pretty key for most kids learning to read. So teachers will put an emphasis on teaching phonics, which is like letter sounds and blends and stuff. That's a best practice. So most teachers will pick a program or have an approach or try a variety of approaches that start with phonics and move outwards. We know that's best practice. We know it's best practice that especially young kids get to use manipulatives, small things that like counters, shapes, 3D things. Like we know that is best practice for math. That does not mean that you as a parent can't do those things. And in fact, most teachers, if you ever actually sit and watch a class, teach one lesson a variety of ways. So they'll teach it kind of like on the board, and then maybe they'll get down and do like a hands-on activity, and then they'll do something else. And then the next day they teach it again because they're trying to make sure that all the students get it taught to them in different ways. so that they all understand, because what one kid understands might not click with another kid, and it might not click with this kid. And when you have 30 kids, most teachers are teaching 4 or 5 different ways to get, the most out of all of their 30 students. You don't have to do that. You can just teach your kid. And if your kid gets it the first time, awesome. If you have to reteach it, then maybe you try something different. But you don't have to teach 30 kids. You're teaching just the kid in front of you. And if there's an approach that's working with them, if you're like, hey, my kid is just totally understanding this, I can just run with it, then you do. And if you're like, don't, awesome. Let's try to figure out a different way. There is no one way to teach. Teachers are often sitting in the staff room going, hey, I'm having a really hard time teaching Billy how to do this. You got any suggestions? Do you have a suggestion? They're doing the same thing that we're all doing on Facebook, going how do I teach this? They're doing the same thing in their staff room. So that's not a concern. There is no one way to teach. There's a lot of ways, and they're all acceptable, except for anything that's violent and abusive. But there's a lot of different ways to teach things. Number 3, teachers don't know everything. This one, when I have told parents this, they have been shocked when I say, that teachers don't know everything. They're like, well, yeah, but they know everything about the unit that they're teaching. I was like, no, they don't. You know what they do? You know what teachers do when they get a new science unit or history unit? So let's say, for example, the curriculum says they need to teach about flight. Do you know what the teachers do? They either grab the textbook and go home and read it all weekend before they start their classes on Monday. And they're reading the textbook because they don't know it. Or they're buying a unit off of Teachers Pay Teachers and they're reading all of that and they're getting that all set up. They don't know all these things. For the most, especially elementary school teachers who are changing grades every year or teaching a variety of subjects, they don't know all of these things. They're refreshing themselves all the time on what the topic is, what the subject is. Unless they have been teaching the same grade for eons and eons and eons, and the curriculum hasn't changed, which it does every 4 years, they're learning just as much as you guys are. They're going through and they're relearning, they're revisiting, they're reading the textbooks. Those are all things that homeschool parents are doing. It's just because they're doing it before your kids see, it makes the teachers feel like it makes people think that teachers know everything because they're doing it all behind the scenes, and you're doing the same thing. It's just in front of your kids, which I actually think is better. To be honest, that's a huge reason why I love homeschooling, is I love to teach my kids that teachers don't know everything. Parents don't know everything. People don't know everything. And when you don't know everything, you can look it up. You can go and research it. And that has led to some incredible learning opportunities, some great rabbit trails to follow. And so embrace it is my thing. If you don't know something, embrace it. Let's learn it together. But yeah, teachers don't know everything. I can assure you. Grade 11, high school gets a little bit different because they do have to be a little bit more qualified to teach certain subjects, especially at a grade 11, 12 level. They do need to have an undergrad. But even then, they're using a textbook and they're reading the textbook and they're going through it. Some schools have whole programs that they're the teachers have to learn to do it. They're doing it. They're learning it just before they go into the classroom. They're refreshing. Trust me, teachers don't know everything. Number 4 is probably the most shocking. Let me tell you, but it's that teachers' college has very little to do with actual teaching and more so to do with classroom management. So when you go to teachers' college, and I've heard this is not a unique experience on my part. Everybody that I know who has gone to teachers' college, basically as an adult, you get sent back to school and you get treated like you are in kindergarten. I'm not kidding. We sat around and did story time so we could practice reading books to children. And we were all the children with one of us taking a turn to read a story today. Like that was the type of stuff we did. We went to art class where every week we were given a different art assignment, and then we would like spend 5 minutes discussing how this was beneficial to students at a variety of grade levels, how we can make it harder or easier. That was maybe a 10-15 minute active part of the lesson. And then we would spend, I'm not kidding, 2 hours a week drawing pictures, coloring, painting, doing crafts. That was art class. Phys ed, we had to run, put on gym clothes and run. Like you go back to school as if you're there, and you might do one practice lesson per class, and then you're watching other people do one practice lesson. The class we spent the most time in was, it was called Methods. Methods was a class that was, I want to say it was 2 hours twice a week. And I think it was 2 hours twice a week. In Methods, it was all about not how to teach, but what to do in your classroom to manage a large number of students. So it was things like, how do you set up your classroom for maximum success? What are the best layouts? How do you have groups? Often should you change your groups? How long should your activities be? Where do you put your pencils? Where do you put your, line up things? Do you have classroom responsibilities? Well, like all those kinds of things were stuff that were discussed in methods class, because that is a huge part of being able to teach 30 kids, is being able to control 30 kids at once by yourself, that is the skill teachers have. Let me make this clear. Teachers teach. The real skill is controlling that many children at once. And so we spent more time talking about like how to get students to line up, and how to get students to be quiet, and how to get students to pay attention, and attention grab. Do you know how many attention grabbers I have? The 1, 2, 3, all eyes on me. I have so many of those. First off, they work. Let me make that very clear to you. They do work. But oh my goodness, we spent entire classes with those. Like just learning how to like get people's attention. We had this one professor who made us move, because she was like, 15 minutes is the maximum amount of time that children under the age of 10 have to be on the ability to focus. So every 15 minutes we're moving. And so we would go from circle time for 15 minutes, and then we would go to our desks, and then we go back to circle time. And then we would have to do this different activity that was over in this section of the room. I literally was exhausted at the end of methods with her, but that's what we did. We did methods class, and it was how to handle difficult students. Like, when do you call a principal? When do you have a student removed from your class? It was all about managing students. And that was the number one thing that came up. Even in our other classes, like for example, in art class, how do you handle students walking around with containers of water? How do you handle students walking around with scissors? How do you hand out scissors when you have 30 kids in the class? How do you hand out paper so that everyone is those were the things that happened in art class. That was the huge part of all of our classes, was how do you maintain control of this many students? Because if you have control and you have their attention, you can teach them something. You don't have that problem as a homeschooler. You don't have 30 kids in your classroom. You have the couple of kids that are sitting in front of you. So for me, that's 2. It is very easy for me to control 2 children without a teaching degree. It's very simple. Like, you don't need a degree to have your kids sit down and listen to you. When you have 30 kids, yes, you definitely need a degree. There's a whole magic to that. But when it's like, hey, come here, sit down. Okay, if you're not going to do your work, then there will be no cartoons later. Boom, done. Like, it can be that simple. Oh, you're hungry? You're having a hard time focusing? Why? What's wrong? You hungry? Okay, go grab a cheese string and come back and do your math. Awesome. Like, it's really easy when there's only 2 kids to deal with. Like, you don't have that problem of 30 kids. So don't worry about it. And then lastly is, especially if you're in an area where you have a lot of freedom, you don't have to deal with government curriculum. So I will say the other thing that happens in Teachers College a lot is we are taught to read curriculum documents because they are taught in something called teacherese, which is essentially a form of writing that tells teachers what they have to teach, what they should teach, and what should be tested on, and like all these different things. But it's taught and it's written in a way that teachers understand, right? Like we are taught to read this document and understand what it says. If you were to go and print off the Ontario curriculum document, I guarantee you would have a hard time with it. You would get the kind of big ideas, like when it says, oh, we're going to learn about flight in grade 5. You're like, okay, flight. And then you start reading all the like expectations and you're like, well, okay, but like how do you know that, how do I know that I did all of those things? Like there's a whole language basically around curriculum documents. And the frustrating thing is they change constantly. Every time there's a government change of power, when you go from conservatives to NDPs or NDPs to liberals or whatever, one of the first things they do in terms of education is they go through and they start revamping curriculum documents, and they change what's taught in what grade. They're changing how it's being taught. They're changing what the focus is. And so then teachers have to like reassess and retweak and change everything and add in parts, like when they added in coding, or they just did a big swing back in terms of like approaches to language, and now we're doing phonics again. Like when you're homeschooling, you don't have to deal with that. I pick a math program that works for my kids. We work through that math program. And if the government changes what they're doing and all of a sudden they're adding something, I just keep doing what I'm doing with my kids. If I'm like, yep, hey, everything says phonics is best practice, we start phonics from the beginning. I'm not waiting for the government to figure it out right now that phonics is best practice and that maybe they should have figured that out before they got sued. So like it just really helps when you are not having to follow or like just loosely follow what's happening, because it does give you the ability to pick something and not be bombarded by the constant changes and focuses and attitudes of the government in that sense. Because, you know, adding is adding. Like I don't need someone to tell me, okay, well now we need to do 3-part math problems every single day, which was a thing when I was in Teachers College. We had to do 3-part math problem was a big thing. 3-part math lessons was a big thing. So you would give them a problem, let them try to figure it out. Then we would all come together and collaborate and show the different ways that we figured it out. And then there'd be a lesson in practice. Like that was a big thing when I was in Teachers College. They don't do that anymore because it took too much time and kids weren't actually getting through any curriculum. So like things change and you don't have to do things that are not focusing in the best interest of your kid. If something is working for your kid, you can just stick with it and just move forward. And I will say that was a huge benefit for a lot of homeschoolers during COVID. Like our days didn't change. Our focuses didn't change. How our kids were learning didn't change. It just stayed the same. And our kids advanced hugely while other kids were struggling. Well, like school numbers are saying, kids lost so much when it came to COVID in terms of education. Homeschoolers just kept going. So all of this to say, you are more than qualified. You have the ability to create a homeschool learning environment that is best for your kid, the kid that's in front of you, and not the hypothetical 30 children that are going to be in a classroom. You can pick what is an interest to them. You can pick what is the best approach for them. And sometimes there is a trial and error process. That happens in schools too. But you are their parents. You have been teaching them since they were babies how to speak, how to use their manners, how to potty. You are more than qualified to homeschool your children. You just need to believe in yourself. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful and inspirational. Make sure that you're subscribed. Consider becoming a member because members get all kinds of cool things, including bonus videos. And make sure you're following us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.